It's Brandon with Horror Train.
This is LA Gore with Horror Train and Horror Central, and we're here with Mistress of the Dark, Lamia from Real TV's Horror Hotel.
How are you today?
Really good. How are you guys?
Pretty
Doing
good.
well. Thanks for doing this with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
I just want to say we've seen enough of your show to know that you're into the 1950s, the retro horror. You like to do a lot of facts about the movie that you're playing, and then you'll show the movie. Is there anything that you can tell us about your experience in doing that?
Well, I'm a big fan of horror myself. I've always loved horror movies, since they were first coming out, and I guess that's why a lot of them are, 1950s and the earlier ones, because, the classics were really the beginning of horror and what started everything that we see today. And, you don't really get a lot of the same, I guess, feelings as you do with the classics with today's stuff. And it's been really exciting to host the show and kind of educate the younger viewers a bit that haven't seen those older movies.
Right.
And, expose them to something new. It's been pretty exciting.
I'm going to branch off and ask you a side question based on that. It's more like nowadays a lot of things effects-wise are driven CGI. Do you prefer CGI or would you prefer practical effects?
Practical effects.
All the way.
Just because, CGI is putting a lot of people out of business in the effects industry, and you can actually get more realism through the practical effects, and that's where it all started. They're kind of taking, I guess, the easy route with CGI nowadays.
Right.
Earlier we saw your House on Haunted Hill
episode, yeah.
Yeah. And, at the end when the skeleton comes up out of the water and everything, it's Vincent Price pulling the strings.
Yeah, we didn't know that you actually taught us, I guess, that they would have the skeleton in the theater, kind of, what would he do? Would he fly across the,
Yeah, just kind of swoop over the audiences in the front, and, that director, William Castle, he did a lot of effects like that for all of his movies, and especially in the horror genre, it just gave that extra scare, and you don't really get that kind of thing nowadays.
Did he do the one with the tingler where one of the seats would vibrate?
Yes.
Right.
And then there was another one where there was a coward's corner. So if you couldn't, I can't remember which film it was, but if you couldn't see the end of the film, then you would have to go and say you were a coward to get a refund on your ticket. So,
That's awesome.
Couldn't make it to the end of the movie.
I would love it if some people took initiative to do something like that again.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, it would be definitely original compared to what else we have nowadays, even though it's been done before.
Right.
I think more often they just try and fill the seats nowadays. They don't really
Right.
care so much about who's going. They just want to sell a
Fill the
ticket.
seats, yeah. So there are some similarities, obviously, between you and Elvira, but there are also some very unique differences. We personally prefer learning the facts about the film as far as just comedy after comedy after comedy. It really shows that you and Real TV take the genre seriously and not just something to kind of poke fun at. Was that a conscious decision to...
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Just, like I said, it's great to be able to educate the viewers and, tell them more about what it was really like when the film was made, especially with the classics when they had a lot of constraints to making movies. And, Elvira was a great horror hostess, and everybody loved her show, but it definitely was campy. And we do some bits throughout the show here and there, but nothing as, I guess, silly or comical. Just something to keep people interested throughout the show.
And it seems like a show that horror fans are going to respect because you obviously know what you're talking about.
Thank you.
And that can be something that's very, very respectable, especially, because the fans in this genre, they're not as much of pushovers as fans of other genres. They're serious and they're diehard. So, in your opinion, what separates a 1950s horror film from the films we've become accustomed to today more? Would it be the gimmicks in the theaters that we're talking about, or the emphasis on the gothic environment as opposed to the hostile type of blood and gore?
Right. Overall, it was just really the ambiance of it.
Right.
You know, they couldn't show the types of things on screen that we get today, and you know, they had to rely on other things like setting up the atmosphere, and you know, they really had to rely on the acting to make you believe it.
Right.
Now, like you said, it's a lot of CGI, a lot of effects, and you know, in your face. And I'll watch current horror movies, but I find I'm more interested in the classics as well as independent horror movies nowadays because they're doing something different than, you know, all these same slasher flicks that we're seeing in theaters.
Right.
It's just really the ambiance of it.
You hit the nail on the head in the House on Haunted Hill episode where you said that the house might have been a more important character than the people, and that's a thing that I think has been lost in the art of filmmaking. They forget that it's not just about the characters, even though that's obviously important. The surroundings can be more crucial to the ambiance of the whole gothic environment.
Right, and it's all a part of the story. And,
right.
You know, nowadays they don't rely on the story as much. Again, it's just, you know, gore and a lot of boobs usually.
There's nothing wrong with that.
So does Horror Hotel have any plans to present films that aren't in the public domain, such as you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Maniac or even Psycho?
I don't think we'll really get into some of the bigger classics, but one thing I would like on the show more is some independent horror movies, because overall the show is about showing you things that you likely haven't seen before.
Right.
You know, and with the independent horror films, you know, they're out at festivals, or, you know, if you know somebody that's seen it, you can see it, but they don't get as much exposure.
Right.
So I think that would be one difference that we're going to be putting in the future.
Another question that I do have is, so you're saying that if people do an independent film and they come to you with it, that you might actually show it on your show. Now, do you do, you obviously do feature-length films, but would you consider doing shorts or like a medley of shorts?
Yeah, like specials, that's one thing that we've talked about doing that I'd like to do in the future. If it's, you know, 2 longer short films or 3 short films, something like that. And, you know, one thing that we do have to watch out for as far as the independent films, you do see a little bit more of the gore and the nudity and things like that. So some things might be censored a little bit just because we're over the air in a couple of different states right now. And
so Horror Hotel is actually live? It's not pre-recorded? Is it live? Or
it is all pre-recorded.
Oh, okay. So
and,
is it...
Sorry. So what is your policy on, I know that a lot of people try to do nudity and stuff in horror films and that genre. So if you were to get, say, like a short film or like a feature independent film, and it had pornography in it, or if it had nudity in it, would you guys censor that, or would you show that?
It would depend on how much was in it and how integral it was to the story itself. You know, a lot of times it's not that much pushing the story along, it's just kind of there for viewers.
Right.
So if it's something that can easily be cut, then we could censor it out and still show the film.
Right.
But if, you know, it's really, if you're going to have a 30-minute film that's really just 5 minutes when you take out the nudity,
right. No, it's we just watched a little snippet of you, not Lamia, but the actress Christina Michelle.
She's my persona, my human persona.
Right. Well, we just watched your human persona sucker punch somebody for saying they wanted to get a spanking, and we had a good laugh about that. So Lamia, how exactly old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Lady never reveals her age.
Right.
But I am the first vampire.
The very first vampire.
Yes. So you have me to thank for all of your vampire films that you've seen, and you know, all of the more famous ones. I've just stayed out of the limelight a little bit more until now.
So you let Lilith take the title when you actually retained the real title. You know, that's very cool. So before, well, I guess if you were the first vampire, this kind of null and voids my next question, but I guess I'll ask it anyway. Before you became a vampire, were you interested in the darker aspects of humanity, or is that something that came along after you?
I think everybody is.
Right.
I mean, everybody has a darker side to them, and I think even though some people are scared a little easier, everybody loves horror. You know, we like to be scared, and, you know, being a vampire just kind of brings out that darkness a little bit more.
Right.
You know, I don't have to hide the fact that, okay, that killing and all of that, that's fun. I like to watch it, you know.
There you go. So did the gladiators and everybody else. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
been part of human psyche since the dawn of time. I'm just glad we're living in a world where people like you can come out and say, you know what, this exists, and you can deal with it.
Yes, I'm coming out of the closet.
There you go. There you go.
Vampire.
Okay, so what's coming up in the future of Horror Hotel? Any conventions or tours or anything like that?
Well, I myself produce and host a horror film festival every June. It's called Horror Hotel, just like the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's in Hudson, Ohio, which is right outside of Cleveland, about 20 minutes from Cleveland, Ohio. That's coming up June 6th through 8th, and then it's the first weekend of June every year. We're also planning tentatively for 2015, we'll also have a Horror Hotel festival in New Orleans. So,
Wow.
kind of more...
Kind of closer to us.
Yeah, count us in for that one. We would love to come do like an in-person interview at some time at one of those events. We would cover the whole thing and get the word out for you guys. So, what would you say to a younger horror fan that claims to only be interested in modern horror? How would you convince them to give the classics a chance?
They don't know what they're missing.
Right.
I mean, they really just need to kind of open themselves up to seeing more, and they have to understand that they wouldn't have the movies that they love today, and you know, all that in-your-face horror. They wouldn't have that if people back then hadn't said, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to make horror movies and scare people.
Right.
You know, they're the ones that started it all, and I think if you're a true horror fan, then you want to know your history, and you want to know how all that came to be. So if you can't watch a classic, you're not a true horror fan. That's what I would tell them.
So this is kind of off the cuff. This is one that wasn't written, but I'm curious. As the first vampire, you've always been interwoven with the darker aspects of society. What was your reaction when you started seeing your kind portrayed in horror movies? I mean, it must have been exciting and.
It's exciting, but mostly it's kind of funny.
Because
there's so many misconceptions.
Right. Were you offended? I mean, do you need to set the record straight? I mean, can you see your reflection?
I can't.
You can't see your reflection?
I can see myself on video. I can see myself right now.
Oh, okay.
That's why I love doing this show, because
you get a good look at yourself.
Yeah. So there's a lot of misconceptions about vampires, but really, I just get a kick out of it.
Can you set some of those misconceptions straight for the record?
Well, there's so many different types of vampires. No, we don't sparkle.
No, we don't sparkle.
Do you sparkle?
No. I don't know. I'm glowing a little bit on camera right now.
Absolutely.
With the right effects, she sparkles.
But naturally, no. I can walk in the daylight, although pretty much the only time you'll see me in the daylight hours is during my festival weekends.
Oh, okay.
Out in the daylight. I am a little more nocturnal. But there's so many different kinds of vampires. You know, some are your violent type that's just going to rip you to pieces. Me, I'm a little friendlier, so
Fortunately.
Yeah, very fortunately. So
I ask first and bite later. Some of them just
there you go.
bite.
There you go. Well, so are there any last words? Is anything you want to share about Horror Hotel besides the conventions that are coming up? Is there any last words that you would like to say to the audience?
Well, right now, if you want to find out about the conventions or more about the show, I mean, you can contact me directly. Even if any indie horror filmmakers are watching, get in contact with us about possibly airing your film, and you can do all of that through horrorhotel.net, and that's kind of our central for the show and the festival.
So you heard them, people. If you want to get on Horror Hotel, you go ahead and you contact Horror Hotel through the. We should link it.
We will link it right below. horrorhotel.net, and start talking to the sweetest little vampire you'll ever meet.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for doing this, Lamia. We're looking forward. How often? One more question I just thought of. How often do you guys actually upload your episodes? I mean, is there one coming up soon?
Yeah, there's about every 2 weeks.
Okay.
And then we are over the air, and if you're in Kentucky watching right now, you can find us on WOBZ Channel 9, and we're on the east side of Cleveland on Cable 9. And then also online, horrorhotel.net. There's a lot of apps that we're on. Pretty much all of them are every 2 weeks. And I think our next episode, the current one is House on Haunted Hill. Our next one is the original Satan School for Girls.
Wow.
So a little later than the classic.
Well, I'm personally really looking forward to that one.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's going to be great. Well, thank you so much. We'll get all the information linked below for all you viewers, and we're looking forward to the next episode, and we wish you the best of luck at your convention coming up next week.
Thank you.
And we will stay in touch, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks for doing this.
Okay, signing off. This is Jacko.
This is L.A. Gore.
See you guys later.